Live from Chicago, this is Bruce DuMont with our Beyond the Beltway analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight, featuring progressive professor Mark Casello, attorney and pro-Trump supporter Kent Gray, conservative commentator and pro-Trump supporter Stephanie Hitt, and Chicago Alderman and Democratic Ward Committeeman Raymond Lopez. Our program tonight coming to you on base at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago. Nice to have you with us. Happy St. Patrick's Day weekend to you all. And I say that in a city where normally this is one of the big weekends of the year. The only thing I've been able to do is put my green sweater on. For those listening to us on radio, the brightness of this green doesn't come through the radio. But again, this is usually a time when the number of arrests for drunken individuals, usually 20-somethings, people throwing up in the streets, that's part of the weekend that we have here in Chicago. That has not happened. And I want to just say why, because given the coronavirus, governors around the United States, whether it is Governor Cuomo or Governor Newsom or Governor DeWine in Ohio and Governor Pritzker today in Illinois, they have all basically jumped ahead of the curve, in many cases ahead of the curve, in doing things in their respective states that the federal government has not yet suggested or dictated. And again, just this afternoon, and again for those listening around the country, this is sort of a big deal because Illinois becomes the first state to make an announcement that they are going to close bars and restaurants. It's effective tomorrow. The announcement was made this afternoon by Democratic Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker.
I am ordering all bars and restaurants in the state of Illinois to close to the public as of the close of business Monday night, March 16th, through March 30th.
Ray Lopez, you are an alderman in Chicago. You're also a Democratic Ward Committeeman. A little bit later on, we'll get into Democratic politics. But again, the world really is focusing, and the country is rightfully focused on coronavirus and how it is affecting everyone's life. What's your reaction to the governor's decision today about closing all bars and restaurants in the city of Chicago or in the state of Illinois?
You know, I think the governor's decision over the past few days, not only with closing bars and restaurants to dine-in customers, but also closing our schools as well, which he announced a day or so ago, is really in an effort to try and stem the amount of viral transmission between residents who are just walking around, going about their daily life. And if we have any hope of containing this virus and limiting its damage to our economy, we must act swiftly, we must act quickly. And I give our governor and many governors great props for their leadership on this issue.
Does Stephanie Hitt, one of our card-carrying conservative Republicans, does it please you or are you dismayed that a lot of these bold decisions are being made by governors without the direct suggestion of the President of the United States?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad that I prefer to have a decentralized government, and our republic is set up in such a way that our states are really the ones that should be making these decisions. So the fact that it's being done on a local level, either the state or locality, is really the way it should be done. I don't want to live in a country where the federal government is going to be in the position of making those decisions across the board.
Mark Casello, you are the closest thing to a progressive we have at the table here this evening. I'm not taking anything away from the alderman, but you're pretty far out there.
Yeah.
Living in academia as you do.
Very
Your reaction to the way this is being handled at the moment and where the leadership is coming from and should come from in the future.
Certainly. Thank you for having me on, Bruce. I'm excited and glad that Governor Pritzker has taken that step. I've been following this very closely, as have many people. I had told my students, I'm a professor, that we're basically a week away from where Italy was when they declared the lockdown with this exponential growth. So if we didn't take immediate steps to socially distance, to close businesses, to get people self-isolating, we risk an explosion of cases. So I think it was those dramatic steps that we're taking today are important, but also the public needs to know that as much as they can stay home. And disagreeing slightly with Stephanie, I like the idea of localized response based on the conditions on the ground, but this is where the federal government could play an important role in ensuring that workers in the gig economy, workers in the retail sector have that paid leave so they can stay home with their families, based on this pandemic.
Yep, we're going to talk about the legislative response in a little bit. Kent Gray also joins us. Kent, nice to have you back with us. A lawyer from Springfield, Illinois, drove up to Chicago. Nice. Thank you. Hope you had a pleasant drive today.
Traffic was light.
Great. It was light coming here and I live a block away. But I tripped over no drunk teenagers on the way. My question to you is, you're the closest thing to an original Trumper that we have at the table. You've worked on the staff for several years now. Can you step back and say that the leadership of some governors has been a welcome addition to what the federal government has been trying to do?
Absolutely, and I think I think we should support. I think some of the governors around the country have now realized this is not a time to be taking pot shots at the federal government. A lot of these we were talking before the program. A lot of these systems and procedures are long-standing at the federal government level with the CDC and the NIH. And frankly, it doesn't matter whether it's a Democratic governor or a Republican president or a Republican vice president. Most of these leaders at that level do not know what the individual, say, testing requirements are or how you produce some of the things that go into quarantines. It's obviously something that only comes up when you have a pandemic, and we haven't had very many of those. And I think everybody's scrambling. And I think the last couple of days you've seen elected leaders now realize, hey, we're all in this together. The governor of Washington has been much less political. The governor of New York has been excellent. Governor Pritzker, I think, had a little bit of an outbreak yesterday towards the federal government dealing with O'Hare. But, I was thinking about the O'Hare situation. Customs and Border Protection is dealing with a situation where they probably have people who are not coming into work because they're worried about their families. You've got an influx of a ton of people that are coming in, and you've got a realization that if everybody is there working every possible shift, they might all get sick, and then we have nobody there to process anybody. So
I want to come back to when criticism is warranted, because you're right. Jay Inslee of Washington took a pot shot at the Trump administration. The president came back personally against the governor. But you're right. One of the things since we met last week is the Democratic governors. I mean, President Trump has reached out and thrown a bouquet to Gavin Newsom in California. There was good conversation, and Governor Cuomo referenced that as well. And again, what you said today is that yesterday afternoon, when Governor Pritzker saw what was happening at O'Hare, he wanted to vent a little bit, and so he vented in a tweet because he knew that's how he would get the attention of the president. He said the federal government has got to get its S together, if you know what S means. And he said on Meet the Press today that he got an angry call back from a White House staffer. But this afternoon, Governor Pritzker announced that there are going to be more Customs and Border people at O'Hare. And so the whole processing of this onslaught of European travelers, Americans coming back from Europe, which is taking place right now at O'Hare as we do this program, is going to be better than it was 24 hours ago. And so that little tweet got to the president, and maybe it did pay off. But the governors, it appears that Democrats and Republicans appear to be getting together a little bit more. Back shortly from Chicago.
A new exhibit from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Stay tuned. Rock on TV. Artifacts from the Jackson 5, Sonny and Cher, Elvis, Cyndi Lauper, ZZ Top, Eric Clapton, and more. Now at the Museum of Broadcast Communications, 360 North State Street, Chicago. From Bandstand to Gaga, let's rock on TV. For info and tickets, visit museum.tv.
Oh, hello. These days, I'm often quoted as saying, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. People forget that I was the first technology president, using the telegraph, T-mails as I like to call them, to communicate with my generals. Well, today, we are fighting a cybersecurity war, and our best defense is for folks to follow some of these tips when they're online. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Hover your cursor over links to determine the true web address. Look for misspellings and poor grammar, which are warning signs of fraud. Be suspicious of emails requesting urgent action, and never give away sensitive personal information. With malware for none, with cyber protection for all. This is your humble servant, Abraham Lincoln.
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Wherever you are listening or watching this program, we would be very interested in how COVID-19 has affected your life or your reaction to the way whether your state government or federal government is responding to it. And, we had a situation, again, we don't want to talk too much about what's happening in Illinois, but again, it was big news that the bars and restaurants are going to be closed tomorrow, although you're going to be able to take out food and have food delivered. But, the impact. Now, Ray, in your ward, you said you have about did you say a couple of hundred restaurants and or bars. Is that correct?
200 restaurants, bars, and particular small businesses. Yeah.
How do they survive? Because I'm sure if they haven't called you, they're going to be calling you tomorrow morning.
Well, I think that's been the big question this whole time that this crisis has evolved is what are we going to do to support the business community? Because a lot of what we're asking them to do is to, let their workers go home to be with their children, be on paid sick leave. And many of these smaller businesses don't have the cash flow to make that happen.
Right.
So I'm glad that the federal government has kind of taken up this issue. I think they need to take it up a little further. But that's definitely a concern because a 3-week quarantine of the city of Chicago can put many of my businesses into bankruptcy.
Yeah. By the way, we should mention that the U.S. House passed legislation last week, and some of the points in that U.S. House legislation. This is now pending in the U.S. Senate, where there's there may be some problems with all of these points, but involves free COVID-19 testing for all Americans if they want it. There's 2 weeks paid sick leave. There's an increase in unemployment insurance. It'll extend the time period. And there is food assistance, because one of the other issues which takes place in a lot of states, because California has shut down their schools, New York has shut down their schools, Illinois has shut down their schools as well, and that is that the many of the children who go to public schools, they're used to getting their breakfast and or lunch at school. And if school is closed, where does that food come from? Because, again, the parents may not have it. They may have jobs. And do you know anything about the specifics of how that's going to be handled, Ray?
So I know, at least in our city, in Chicago, that Chicago Public Schools will be providing meals to families that want to come and pick them up. 95% of our students qualify for the federal food assistance program. So that means that this is probably their only source of food during the day. So our schools will be open to help parents. But I think what's important to note, too, when you talk about the expanded items that the federal government did, that it only qualifies for companies 500 employees or less. So if you're a part of a bigger business, if you are a part of Walmart or one of those bigger stores or companies, you do not qualify for the extended paid leave. You don't qualify for this extended paid sick time. You are left at the behest of your company.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask a political question to you, Kent. The pieces that were in the House-passed bill, is the Republican Senate at this point, is there a gun at their head that they really they've got to capitulate to what the Democrats want, or they once again will be perceived to be by the Democrats and their friends in the media as being the big bad guys that are keeping food from young children or paychecks from those who have lost their job?
I think this is one of those situations that we found, post 9/11, post 2008 financial crisis, is the Republicans clearly cannot put the kind of austerity in that they would like to from a policy standpoint. So they're going to have to swallow some provisions that they don't like, and that is just a reality. I do think that they did walk back the House on a few things that they wanted to do that were outside of the policy of getting people back, taking care of people in this thing.
Are they going to stay firm on the payroll tax deduction?
I think they really want to push. I think they really want to push that. And to be honest, I think it's a very targeted and effective way to get money back in people's paychecks every single week. And it's relatively simple to put into place for employers and everyone else.
One of the things that hasn't been talked about too much, and I think when we talk about what's in the bill, but then there's also, a lot of it will depend on whether there are what they call sunset provisions. That these are temporary stopgaps, so that we don't have representatives going out there saying, "Hey, I don't want something that's going to totally change the tax code or totally this." And I think there is a sense that say within 6 months, for example, we'll know where we stand with the virus. We'll know the extent of the epidemic. We'll know the extent of the economic impact. And so these measures, can be temporary for a while. So to the extent, I do get the feeling that the Senate isn't going to be too stingy either, because these are common sense type of resolutions. I think we would all say at least 2. If we talk about 2 weeks as a typical quarantine time, then having a sick paid leave that matches that is not
And
Does this,
Republicans voted for it.
unreasonable.
And
Yeah.
Republicans voted for it
I
overwhelmingly.
think you're
too.
going to see a lot of cooperation here.
do you agree with that, Mark?
Well,
Is this an opportunity to show Republicans in a different light?
Well, I think this is a time of bipartisanship. I think we're at the tip of the iceberg here. We don't really know what's coming. So these initial first steps are good. But the WHO has stated that the real cycle on this is 2 weeks from onset of symptoms to 8 weeks to the determination to the end. So we're talking about really an 8-week cycle for many people who are going to have this virus.
But when some of the governors, I like the Governor Pritzker position, that's the end of March. That's only a couple of weeks away. And I think some of the things in California, I think, were the end of April. So you have governors making different decisions as to when their schools will be closed. But is everybody just guessing as to what the right time is?
Yeah.
It sure
Yeah, I
seems that
think
way.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
They're
I would
basing it on what they're
disagree.
seeing in Europe, probably. Like what the cycle time is in Europe.
Well,
and
they're saying the
trying to
horror
gauge
story
that.
in Italy. They don't want to
They
repeat
are saying
that.
that. That's we're trying to do it with the idea. But the idea is we're making a guess, saying we're doing this before we get to be Italy. So we don't know how flat of this curve we can make it. We're trying to do it, but without being so extreme that literally we stop.
Right, okay.
So I was going to disagree, and I think it's to say that within a week we could see an exponential growth of this, and 2 weeks certainly. If we've looked at the exponential J curve on all of these cases in France, Italy, Spain, Korea, if you just overlay those graphics, you can see that the trend line is very similar. So we have, we've been gifted really with a lot of foresight, a chance to see what's coming our way. And the question as to whether we've done enough will be borne out in the next week or two. If we can see that, they said we're beyond sort of flattening the curve, but if we can blunt it, that can,
Right.
can
And
keep the-
Well, but
new
again,
things are
this is
happening every
important,
day.
the speed with which this happens. And again, I'm coming back to Illinois statistics. Everyone knows that statistics obviously are different in different parts of the country. West Virginia is the only state thus far that has no reported cases of COVID-19. But in Illinois,
Moonshine.
On wood.
moonshine?
Moonshine. I saw a meme on it. It must be true.
Okay. What did you say? Did you say?
Oh, yeah,
did
okay.
you say inbreeding?
I can say that because
Breeding?
my family is from West Virginia.
Okay, what did
But
you say then?
thankfully,
What did you say?
our family tree
Share it
does
with
fork.
everybody, Stephanie.
I said it was keeping a closed genetic community. However, I don't want to rag on West Virginia. I am, my family is from
They
West
already
Virginia.
will be calling you. Okay, it's Stephanie
My
Hitt.
family is from there. I love you all, and but it, one of the things that makes us a little different from Spain, Italy is we're seeing it ahead of the time, and so we are kind of groping around a little bit in the dark, but we do have the benefit of seeing where it could go, what it's doing, and those 2 or 3 weeks might be the difference for us.
I was mentioning that first of all, in Illinois, it went on March 10th. There were 19 reported cases, and today there are 93 reported cases in Illinois. That's a big jump.
But 0 deaths right now.
But 0 deaths at the moment.
At the moment.
And again, now we're going to get in. Let's switch gears. In fact, we do have some callers on the line. Let's bring them into the conversation. Let's go to Peggy. She's listening to us on WCGO, which is our flagship station in Evanston, Illinois. Go ahead, Peggy.
Hi. I have some amazing news for you. You got to check a station called Relevant Radio. It's a Catholic radio station.
Yeah.
And they had a doctor, I think Philip Chen or something. Anyway, listen, they found a drug that will take care of the virus.
Who did?
It's a very effective drug. So I wanted to tell you that good news because maybe that'll stop the panic, because I went to the grocery store and people were grabbing stuff off the shelves, and I mean, it was crazy. So there's a lot of really strange, bizarre behavior going on, and a lot of stuff, like they said that, for young people, they'll get sick, they'll get over it, okay? It's the people that are like 60, 70, 80 years old. They are in real danger, and they found this drug. Why do you think China's rate is going down? They're using this drug, okay? I don't know the name
What
of
is the
it.
drug, Peggy? Because you've got everybody perplexed
we're
here.
excited.
I haven't heard
drug,
Dr. Fauci reference this, so.
CDC is checking it now, but of course they has to be True Blue and everything.
Well, yeah.
China can't wait. I mean, they took the drug and their cases are going down. So
Okay.
all I can tell you is listen to Relevant Radio. It's something Sheila Lagminas.
Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I thank you for your suggestion, Peggy, but
Well,
I
I'll
don't.
tell you,
Let me
it's-
just, Peggy,
they
listen,
found-
and I
they
mean,
found
I mean this in good spirit. So please take it in the spirit that I give it. I don't think we're going to find the answer to COVID-19 by a phone caller calling in with referencing another radio show where she may have heard the answer,
to it
and it's working in China.
yourself.
I
Listen to it
think
yourself,
I
okay?
will do it myself, but you know what? I want to hear it from Dr. Fauci, and I want to hear it from Dr. Redmond, and I want to hear it from Alex Azar, or I want to hear it from Mike Pence or the President of the United States. But thank you very much for offering your 2 cents. Back shortly with more calls. I'm Bruce DuMont. Don't go away.
A line is a powerful thing. It connects the global economy to your living room, cleaner air to stronger markets, factory floors to less crowded roads, today's progress to tomorrow's promise. Norfolk Southern. One line, infinite possibilities.
Meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy.
With instant acceleration, electric cars are more fun to drive and more affordable than ever. Electric cars are here. Plug in to the present.
The economy is not working for everybody, especially those in jobs where unscrupulous businesses keep wages lower by hiring millions of illegal workers. Those businesses could use the government's E-Verify system to prevent illegal hiring, but they refuse. What's best for the country? Let businesses continue to hire illegal workers or require E-Verify, raise wages, and recruit left-behind Americans? See what voters want at everifyworks.com. Paid for by Numbers USA, because numbers count.
There are a lot of people.
Okay, we are back, and by the way, I have my little sample of a hand sanitizer, which the folks at PNC Bank gave me. I'm going to pass it around. It's for all of our guests. So pass it around, Mark.
We gotta
Wash
show
your
everyone
hands.
how to do
Fix
it.
your hands.
We have to show everyone
We
how
got to
to
do it real. You don't have to sing Happy Birthday when you're using this. I don't think. Anyway, we have an interesting program this evening. I think we do. We'll find out whether you do. We've got callers on the line, but we also want to take a moment to let each of our guests introduce themselves and give you a little background on who they are and how they got here. We start with Stephanie Hitt.
I'm Stephanie Hitt. I'm a conservative commentator and activist in Evanston, Illinois. And I am finding out with the latest ban that I am going to have to learn how to cook very soon. So,
Well, it's about time.
yeah.
Speaking
Sorry,
for your husband
people.
and your family,
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Ray Lopez.
I'm Raymond Lopez, alderman of Chicago's 15th Ward and the Southwest Side, dealing with a lot of the local issues, the impact of COVID, and how we're all responding. But unlike you, my husband does great cooking, so all I have to do is make sure I wash the dishes so we can keep cooking, and we'll all get through this fine.
Kent Gray, we go back a long time, my friend. It's nice to have you back on Beyond the Beltway.
It's great to be back after a couple decades, I think. And we're both
sorry it's been that long.
It's been a while. But Kent Gray, I am an attorney in Springfield, Illinois, longtime political activist, hack, elected official, and was Donald Trump's state director in Illinois and Missouri in the 2016 primaries.
Are you continuing to do some advance work for his rallies around the country?
I haven't done advance for a little while, but I did the first 2.5 years of the administration. I did 5 continents and 26 states. Yeah, so rallies and state visits, did the 75th anniversary.
And you were not
D-Day.
surprised what happened on Election Day in 2016?
I was totally surprised. And I was in New York. I was in New York.
We're there.
I was in New York, and I was standing there at the rail, and I shook his hand, and I watched him come down, and I think Donald Trump was surprised that night, too. If you look at his face, I think he was surprised. But I'm not saying I don't think he could have, that he wasn't going to win or he couldn't win it, but I was surprised that Hillary Clinton made some of the missteps that she made in the last month of that campaign.
She made a lot. And Mark Casello, nice to have you again.
Yes, I'm Mark Casello. I'm the Director of English and Media Communications at Calumet College of St. Joseph in nearby Whiting, Indiana, outside Chicago. And I'm the founder and president of the Pullman National Monument Preservation Society on the Pullman National Monument on Chicago's South Side.
And there's been a lot of movement on that in recent months, right?
A lot of activity.
Influx of money.
You have a lot of investment in restoring the iconic clock tower of Pullman. If you've ever seen the movie Polar Express out there in the listening audience, it's modeled after Pullman's clock tower. The train station in the North Pole is modeled on the Pullman community.
Of all the things that you, as a young man, that you could have been involved in a philanthropic way and a nonprofit way, what was it about the Pullman project that brought you to it?
So Pullman's a unique historic site because it brings together many threads of American history. I'm interested in issues of labor rights, but I've also I'm interested in industrial history, social history, women's history, African American history. So all those threads come together in Pullman because well, some of my neighbors have said it's where black and white history meet. You have the story of the Pullman porters, George Pullman as an entrepreneur, industrialist. So it's really a microcosm of American history on
Mark,
Chicago's South Side.
have you heard about the Robert Todd Lincoln train car that you're going to get?
Absolutely,
Have
yes.
you heard who found that?
No, who found
It's me.
Wow, I can't
So
believe
we will talk after this.
great.
Meeting.
It's a fallout from doing advance for Judy Bar Topinka in 2000. When was that? 6? I don't even know. And we were trying to do a whistle stop tour, and I came across this car and got Canadian National to donate to the state of Illinois. And
That's excellent.
Oh,
Yes,
wow.
friend.
at Pullman, and my grandfather worked at Pullman.
Wow, that's incredible.
So
exciting.
Mark and I are going to be friends after this. I didn't think politically we would be, but now we're going to be buddies forever.
I think we have a podcast in the making here.
I think you do. I think you're going to have to invite my husband for that one because he loves trains.
Let me mention, by the way, a couple of people are sending notes in. They're saying that one of the reasons that the rate has gone down in China is that they self-isolated. As you remember, Wuhan was shut down. 56 million people were shut down. China has the ability to do that with the drop of a hat. And also there was clarification that Governor Gavin Newsom, he has recommended that the bars and restaurants in California be shut down. He's not dictated that they could. However, San Francisco is shutting down its bars, not its restaurants, and that starts, I believe, tomorrow as well. And in Illinois, tomorrow is the last day if you want to go out and dine in public for a while. Let's go to Mike in Spokane, Washington. Mike, first of all, you're listening to us on KXLY. That's in Spokane. Yes. That's in Eastern Washington. But how are you dealing with the COVID-19 problem in your state? Because it's sort of an epicenter for it.
Well, it is. It is. Yeah. First of all, hey, St. Patrick's Day and wearing the green. It is. We've had 40 deaths in Washington State. Most of those were in Kirkland, as you know, near Seattle nursing home.
Yeah.
40 deaths here in Spokane County. we've had 3 confirmed coronaviruses, but no deaths. So the schools are all closed here, grade schools, high schools in Washington State. The mood here in Spokane is apprehensive, but not paralyzing. So we're positive we're going to keep on trucking here. But what I would like to bring up too, Bruce, is that I think one gate that's left open, and thank you for taking my call, is the homeless shelters, the homeless people, the low-income people, and they need testing as well to see where they're at and where we're at. You know, the money shouldn't just go to the rich.
No, but I guess a question that I would ask is, I want to ask Ray this. Ray, do you agree with Mike that this is a unique community, or are they, because of their lack of funds, are they less likely to have traveled to China and Italy and maybe not very susceptible?
Well, I think if you're basing this virus spreading simply based on travel, the odds that a homeless person or someone of low income or someone with addictions that's on the street probably is not going to be coming in contact with the virus. However, as people make more of a joke about this and they start disregarding what they say when they say stay home, like we've seen today, everyone was told stay home for St. Patrick's Day, but yet every bar is full. People are still walking around. You know, that is the most vulnerable population to try and address these issues with, and it would be a perfect breeding ground if the virus were to get into the homeless population and spread like wildfire, because they still group together, they still come together in close quarters, they have very limited access to healthcare that can address even the most basic, let alone the coronavirus, and that would come back to haunt us later if we don't address and treat them as equally as we want everyone else to be treated.
Now, when you say when they come together, do they come together in homeless shelters, or if someone is out on the street, are they less likely because maybe the concentration of people would not be as great as going to a shelter?
Well, I'd say all of the above. I mean, you look at like Pacific Garden Missions in Chicago, where you have 150 beds where everyone's in there.
Right.
Once that shelter closes for the day and everyone goes out, they all congregate in the same spaces. Or if the individuals congregating in the neighborhoods are in the same spaces, sharing food, sharing drinks, sharing whatever, you know, that kind of person-to-person contact is the exact opposite.
I would be
of
very
what-
interested in hearing from the home audience whether or not what their concerns are, not only for the homeless, but are there other populations that should be taken into consideration that you haven't heard much about? I'd be like interested. So it's 1-800-723-8289. Mike, thank you for your call. But Kent, your point on the homeless situation.
Well, I mean, it's a tough situation, and I think you have the possibility. You know, one of those of us that grew up in the '80s and spent a lot of time watching the AIDS virus take hold in the United States, and obviously it's a much different medical world that we live in now. But intravenous drug users at the time were a common way of moving that virus, had nothing to do with some of the underlying stuff. And you could have that situation going on again here. You know, you think about a soup kitchen where everybody's sharing the same, you know, and the same stuff. And then you have a lot of people that are volunteering there that have a pretty wide community disbursement. All of a sudden, that can move very quickly into a larger area.
The social distancing and the hygiene, you know, the very things that are going to flatten this curve for us isn't necessarily a part of that community, and it's not even available to that community.
Washing your hands is not an option every day.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I just wanted to stress again, one thing that kind of gets overlooked, like I've heard a lot of, you know, I'm a professor, so I hear sometimes students will say things like, well, I'm hearing that this is just like influenza. It's not much different. A lot of people die from the flu, but we have to remember none of us have immunity. There's no one in our population that has immunity to this, unlike influenza where we have a variety of built-up immunity for different strains. So if a population of homeless people were to become infected and spread it, that could easily happen. And so I think getting information out there, how do you reach people? They're talking about telemedicine. They're talking about get online. My parents are elderly. They don't have the internet.
They don't get online.
And you still read too much about people who think they have it and they go into a medical center without calling ahead. And probably the most important thing they're stressing is if you think you've got it, call your medical provider first so that they can arrange that everybody's safe when you get there. Because walking into a room full of folks, if you really do have it, is the most dangerous thing that you can do.
It's interesting because we are getting a little bit of mixed messages in terms of who should be tested, because we are hearing that if you have mild symptoms, stay at home, call your doctor. You're not necessarily someone who are going to test. And so you're hearing that message. At the same time, we're still at a huge loss in terms of understanding how many people are actually exposed to this thing. So if say half of the people aren't getting tested who may have it, and they're staying home and self-quarantining and self-isolating, we may never have those full numbers. And those are the very people we don't necessarily want to waste tests on, because they are mild symptoms, they are recovering and whatever. But then in another part, to get more knowledge, we almost need to get those guys to get tested, but we don't want them clogging up the emergency rooms either, because they really don't need it.
And also, the president or Dr. Fauci has said that a virus is 18 months at least away, and people saying that's too long. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the other viruses that never came. Back shortly.
When CSX moves forward, so do the rest of us.
Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville, Tuscaloosa. All major cities to feel the destruction caused by a direct hit from a tornado. Is Chicago next? It's not a question of if, but when, and the clock is ticking.
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thank you very much. Before the break, I misspoke.
Learn what to do now at ready.illinois.gov to become tornado ready.
Viruses, because a lot of people are now waiting for 18 months when hopefully we will have a vaccine for COVID-19. But again, we don't know that as a fact, and we don't know whether it's even going to return. I mean, the suggestion is there's a flu season that we have been used to, but we don't know yet whether this season is going to come back. And if it does it mean no March Madness next year? Does it mean the same things that we're going through now are going to have to? Is that sort of a life in America that we're going to have to get used to? And also, we should remember that in 2002 SARS. They still don't have a vaccine. It's 18 years later. There is no HIV vaccine. That's 30 years later. So the vaccine 12 to 18 months out isn't a guarantee that we're going to have anything resolved at all. And this person also said that they would worry about the undocumented communities who are afraid to come forward, prison populations, homeless populations, because in many cases the homeless spend their time in libraries and they interact with other people in libraries. So it isn't just the homeless person sitting on the street; it's acting in public buildings. So there's a lot of there's just it's a horrendous situation that we find ourselves in. And hopefully we can continue to have these discussions where we're talking about common sense and some compassion, in addition to having our eye on public safety and not politicize it, right?
And I think, during the break, Stephanie and I were both talking about the other vulnerable population, which is our seniors, particularly seniors like in nursing homes, seniors in rehabilitation homes. I have 2 that are filled with 150 people each. And if that virus made its way in through a visitor, you could decimate an entire building easily. And oftentimes those seniors, and particularly in low-income communities, don't necessarily have the immediate access to the health care that they need, might just shrug it off as cold or flu, and it will definitely hit them as well.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything more? We have avoided the politics of it thus far, but Kent, I do want to ask you, because there has been some criticism of the White House that they were slow to react to this, even though the president was very quick to call out China and stop all travel to and from China, that was viewed as a positive thing, that the slowness or the conflicting comments about tests and when tests are available maybe have created a lack of confidence in the federal message, and a lot of those people also thought that the president's Oval Office address was not a stellar performance. And speak to whether there's some relevance and some importance and some reality to those criticisms.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you have a situation like this, no one gets it 100% right. I think the White House has done a pretty phenomenal job of being transparent. They've really gotten their act together on messaging the last few weeks. I think one of the problems is, you have these kind of reoccurring coronavirus, flu virus, medical issues that come up about every 2 to 4 years historically. And the question is, are they SARS? Are they MERS? Are they coronavirus? Is it the Ebola? Ebola was going to wipe us out a few years ago. And so when you get into this, can you shut down the economy with no knowledge of how bad it might be? The reality is you kind of have to wait to see how bad it might be before you make some of the decisions that some of these governors are now making.
Why is this situation being handled differently than SARS or other previous
H1N1,
or H1N1?
which was the most
Why is it different?
It's a political year.
Say again?
It's a political year. I mean, we're in an election cycle, and I
disagree.
think there's a lot of attention being paid to it that wasn't paid to H1N1.
Well, I think I'm sorry, but I think the politics was injected by the president, and I think that's where he made some major missteps when you called coronavirus a Democratic hoax.
Right.
That one still bothers
he did
me.
not. Ray, he did not say that. He did not say that. He said that Democrats were using it as a hoax, like they did it other thing. He was not saying that the virus itself was a hoax.
But you've politicized this as just for gamesmanship. When, as we've seen, this was not about politics. This was 152,000 people today who've been infected across the globe. Almost 9,000 people have died from it across the globe. No Democratic, anybody has the ability to do that. And I think when he tried to use the politics of it at his rallies, that's where he made some serious missteps, because if he had stayed above the fray, a lot of the questions about leadership, about how he's handling it, would have dissipated in the hopes of national unity around the crisis.
Is there truth to that?
I
Is there truth
feel,
to that?
When
he wears a Make America Great hat,
yeah.
when he's meeting at the CDC, again, I don't think that's a good idea.
I'm going to say this, and I've said this a lot about Donald Trump. There are a lot of ways that you can criticize with the way he says something. He has his moments, his cringe, but at the end of the day, you have to sort of look at what he's actually doing and what he's done. And one of the things, and I have not heard a single Democrat come out and agree with Dr. Fauci as saying that the single most important thing that was done, and it was something he chose to do under great criticism, was to shut down flights from China, to shut down travel from China. And the only person that's actually out there saying that is Dr. Fauci. And I have yet to hear this president get credit. Now, I don't know that I want to spend today fighting about who's saying what.
He gets credit for that. Mark Costello's got it.
He's not getting enough.
There'll be plenty of time to assign blame later, but time is of the essence right now. We've got whatever measures we put in place today, we won't know the effect of those for about at least 11 days is what the timeline shows. So, it's not the time to politicize this or find blame, but we've lost valuable time. And we're almost, testing's great, but I think we're almost beyond the point of testing.
We're still ahead of Europe, where Europe was at the same point. So, I think what we need to do is the more that things like the FDA finally lets go of regulations and lets people start doing things.
And I think we gained valuable time with that Chinese flight interruption. I mean, this is a give and take on a lot of different issues. But I think that was a huge.
But I will say, as a Democrat, I don't think he went far enough with closing the borders, because this could have been a perfect opportunity to recall all our citizens back and to contain our Americans here, to inoculate us from everything else going on.
When we come back, we're going to talk about that. Ray Lopez say closing the borders. I want to talk about that, Ray, when we come back.
Okay, Ray.
I think we may start with that subject when we come back. We have lots of callers on the line. I thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Also, in the next hour, we're going to be talking about the transport problems of COVID-19.
Welcome to the world, 2116. You can fly across town in minutes, or across the globe in under an hour. Whole communities are living on Mars. And solar satellites provide Earth with unlimited clean power. In less than a century, Boeing took the world from seaplanes to space planes, across the universe and beyond. And if you thought that was amazing, you just wait.
Today, fresh fruits and vegetables will go from a field in California to a grocer in Miami. A bottle of beer from Eagle Pass will journey to a restaurant in Manhattan. A 2x4 in Oregon will find its way to a townhome in Denver. A hybrid will say goodbye to Detroit and hello to a showroom in Austin. While a steel beam will leave a mill in Illinois for a high-rise in Phoenix. And a flat screen in China will head to an electronics store in Memphis. Because today, as every day, wherever you find business, you'll find us.